I saw my cup that the staff gave me.
I don't love that cup.
I can't show you the bottom because it's not empty, but I think it says more meetings.
Meetings about meetings and more meetings.
I'm happy to share the Stanford University study that shows a direct inverse ratio between productivity and how many meetings you have. I've used it to get fired from several jobs. So
There you go. Well, then you shouldn't show it to me. All right, so we'll call this Finance Committee meeting to order. It's 10:05 and all members are present. I think I can just say that instead of doing a roll call if that works. Great. So first we're going to start off with a sales tax report. I included in here a memo from Willie that will be put in the commissioner's packet. But he did present it to the San Juan Development Board on Friday, and I asked if I could share it with you all. He takes a little bit of a different approach than I have in the past, looking at inflation. He did this with basically it's just if you Google online and see an inflation rate from a certain date, and then it'll come up. So I just wanted to point that out, and just so that you guys had this on hand. And if there was any discussion that we wanted to do around this, I can kind of walk you through it. I had taken some notes from him. But basically, he used a CPI inflation calculator, and if you spent money on a date, what it would equal to on this date. So that's kind of where those numbers came from. And then looking at the lodging tax and the dip in the lodging tax, attributing it to kind of a wet summer and potentially that we didn't have all of our RV parks full. That could have been OHVs, or there's some speculation in his narrative there. But just kind of wanted to get your eyes on this and see if you had any thoughts, comments, or feedback on it.
I have lots of questions, comments, of course, as you can imagine. So I think I really appreciate Willie putting this together and the time that went into it. I know it's not easy to put all these numbers together and do the inflation adjustment. I think I'm a little leery of using the CPI number for our inflation adjustment. And this might sound really wonky to people, but the CPI is really a consumer inflation index. So it's looking at, what does it cost to buy a basket of goods for a consumer? But like inflation for a consumer is going to be very different than inflation for a town or even a retailer. So while I think inflation adjustments will be very useful when thinking about our sales tax, I think we haven't quite gotten there yet on what numbers we're using. And again, nothing against Willie. He pulled the numbers that were more readily available. Obviously, inflation adjustments and which indices to use is really a in the weeds kind of thing. But I think we need to be careful with what numbers we're using, because when we inflation adjust something, the numbers are very sensitive to which rate we use. So for example, if we're looking at our sales tax, if we use an inflation rate that isn't actually depicting what something that relates more to the town's inflation would be, then our inflation, the trends here could be quite a bit higher or lower. So it's very sensitive to what number we use. So I think there's some options here. It would be really neat to get this data from Willie if he was willing to share that, or Gloria, you might have that, and we could just do a little bit more analysis on it, because I think it's a great first attempt. But again, I'm not sure inflation adjustment here is quite right. And I think if we're going to adjust sales tax numbers for inflation, which is appropriate, we also need to adjust our expenditures for inflation, right? So if our revenue inflation rate is high, but our expenditure inflation rate is lower, then we would make different assumptions about how much of a kind of quote unquote surplus or growth in revenue we would have. If our expenditure inflation rate tracks our revenue inflation rate, then that's a little bit more straightforward, but it's not guaranteed to. So I think there's just a lot more we could do with these numbers. And I think this memo has certain attributions that I think are maybe assumptions. And I just think there's more we could do here. I also noticed that in his charts, the remote sales tax rates are not adjusted for inflation. So I think just to be consistent, it would be good to have those adjusted for inflation as well. Otherwise, we're not really comparing like apples to apples. Yeah, so I think there's a lot we can do with this. I think it's really helpful. I think in the community, we're looking for these kinds of numbers and information. I just think we could do a little bit more work on the town side to make sure that the numbers we're using accurately reflect what would make sense for a town. Like if CPI, if a consumer's basket of goods is heavily dependent on inflation rate for rent, right? That's not necessarily the same dynamic that the town is working with for inflation, or heavily dependent on fuel, right? That's not always the same expenditure that the town would have. So I just think we might want to look at a different index when we're adjusting for inflation.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think when you learn about consumer price index, you learn that it's just a tool, and it's typically one of several that you want to try and use to paint a bigger picture. And we need to be able to use it again for, as Dana said, for expenditures and for liabilities and assets. But I don't, I think also that there were a lot of speculation. There was some speculation made in that memo that I'm not sure, it could be incredibly accurate and it could be way off. And I just don't think that just using it as a tool, and like she said, a broad strokes, this is fine just to get us just to start, but it's certainly not, I wouldn't say that it's the end all be all for last season for trying to figure out how inflation is affecting us.
Jim, thoughts?
I am unmuted. My computer, I forgot to plug it in, so I apologize. So what are the recommendations of exploring this further?
Sure. And so one thing that I'm looking into, and I did while I was down as like a fun project, was actually looking at what our local economy is bringing in for sales tax. So the reports we get right now is they're asterisk as remote, but that doesn't mean that the other half is local. And so what I've done is for the month of December, I looked through 6,000 accounts and found which ones were actually in town, in our town limits, and compared that to our report local and remote. And it was actually alarming amount were not actually in our town limits, even though they were identified as local. So they could have had a distributing center somewhere, like in Colorado Springs, and it's still considered local. So out of this, so I was able to do that with our 1% sales tax that we get directly from the state, because that's the data that I can manipulate and look at. And I'm the only one allowed to do that. So I did it while I was down, because that seemed like a really monotonous project. And it was. But like the preliminary data was that, out of the $8,000 that we received for our 1% sales tax in December, only 2,000 of it was from our local businesses. So what's that showing us is that a lot of that's coming in from like ordering online. Lots of that is coming from ordering online, but that is just from the December, just for the month of December. And that doesn't include like all of the businesses didn't pay their taxes. Sometimes they're on different schedules on paying their taxes. So to really look at that for the year, but now I have some data that I can start manipulating. And when I import new data,
measure, it's the wrong month because a bunch of people are ordering. Oh, sorry. I was saying that, like, I'm just curious about the December framework, because that's like I know it's what you had, but I think it is tricky to use a snapshot in time in December when we're like, that's a high online sales ordering, and businesses also may not have reported their, oops, sorry, my video's off, may not have reported their sales tax. But I do think we need to get you another mug, Gloria, that says I geek out on spreadsheet rows, because that's what you were doing during your time off.
That's also, December's the time of year that also people will pay a lot of bills that they've left for the year. As an ambulance
Yeah.
company, we see a lot of people come and pay their final bill in December. And so
Mhm.
there's a lot of, that's, you know, that's always a tricky one to try and adjust for, but.
So my idea is to do it for the whole year, so we get a full picture of what that looks like. But unfortunately, it can't be done, as I've explained to you all before, through the system. So we actually have to do it. We have to manipulate it ourselves. And I'm the only one that can do that, because I'm the only one that has that authority. So I hope to have more numbers as I get capacity for that, but it hasn't been the top of my list, but it was cool to be able to start this project. And hopefully as I import new spreadsheets, it will automatically sort now, so that I won't have to go through 6,000 accounts. I'll only have to go through like maybe 1,000 to 2,000.
Well, and it's
Cool.
you've done the work of flagging the right vendors in the
Right.
spreadsheet. Yeah.
Yeah.
And as we go along, yeah, I think there's just a lot of things we can do with that. So I appreciate your effort, but that is an onerous task. Thank
Yeah.
you.
It was great to do while I didn't want to think and just sort, basically. So as you can see in here, we have our sales tax chart updated for the month of December in here. So it says February, but we're 2 months in the rear. And we're down slightly. So last year was 56,000 and this year we're 49,000 that we've collected for that month. And it's still one of the highest sales tax that we've received, not counting last year. So I'm pretty confident in the way we've budgeted so far for 2023 and the revenue that we'll receive. Any thoughts on that one? All right.
Oh,
Is there any way? Oh, go ahead, Tyler.
Jim?
Oh, I guess my main question was, like, are you able to get the spreadsheets from Willie that is driving this information so we can kind of do our own analysis? I think there's some really great charts in here, but like, for example, I was looking at the pie charts by month. It'd be really helpful to have those as like a line graph, because then you could compare months to months, right? In the pie chart format right now, we can't really look at over time, where is our spending by month going, or seasonal changes happening. Like, I think there's so much more we could do if we could get the background spreadsheet, and maybe it really is just the our town of Silverton sales tax chart.
Yep.
But
those
yeah.
are the spreadsheets he worked off of, and the ones that he puts in his packet for the commissioners. So there's this one, there's one for lodging tax that he puts in there, and as well for the county. So
yeah. Okay. And then I had a question about the lodging tax. Has that rate ever changed? Maybe Jim, you could speak to this. Like, I see an overall trend, maybe starting in like 2014, 2015 of going up, but I was curious if that rate's ever changed. Like, is that a trend that is depicting actual growth, like increase in tax collection, or is it a trend that relates to an increase in the rate of the lodging tax? Does anybody know? Did we raise the lodging tax at any point?
and that would have been a ballot measure.
It hasn't been raised since that date that you
Okay.
specified.
Mhm.
Yeah. So the trend we're seeing in maybe the last 5 to 8 years is an upward trend, and the rate hasn't increased necessarily.
That is correct.
Thanks.
And then it's also a combination of individuals paying that lodging tax and having more lodging come online over the past several years.
Right. You're saying an increase in beds, basically, whether it's vacation or hotels. Yeah.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, lots of really good stuff here. I think there's so much more we could do with the data and information. And again, maybe a different inflation measure could be more precise for us.
Oh my gosh, if I could just work on this all the time, I would. I find this information really fun to kind of dig deep on.
You know, I was thinking too, but just put in the back of your mind, Gloria, a pie chart that showed, like, if we could get an inflation measure that we think is right, maybe it's an inflation measure for like producers or retail, like something that's different than the consumer price index. And we had a pie chart that showed percent of sales tax increase that we could attribute to inflation or remote sales tax, right? Like, I think that's what our community is really wanting to know. It's like this itch that we'd really like to know, like, what percent of our growth, because we can see growth on these charts, but we'd all really like to know what percent of our growth is attributable to inflation and to remote sales tax, to the change in the law of the remote sales tax. That's like this big question mark, I think. And you know, we'd have to do some different things to get at that analysis, but that kind of pie chart is, I think, really what we're all curious about.
That's great feedback. Awesome.
And didn't we see this jump back in 2019 as far as the collection of that?
Yes, so that was a Supreme Court ruling in 2019, Wayfair versus South Dakota, that all sales tax would come back to local municipalities, and it's worked out great for us.
I mean, you can see it in the chart, right? Whether it's inflation adjusted or not, you see from 2018 to 2019 that jump. I mean, again, we continue to see just an overall increase in growth, except for 2018, there's a dip. Maybe that's the wasn't that the fire, but overall there's a trend upwards, but you really see that change with that ruling. It was significant for our community.
Yeah. Cool. All right.
Cool stuff. I'll geek out with you, Gloria, because again, that's the household I live in.
No, I'd love to. I love that stuff. All right. Are we good to move on to payroll?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Melina's here to present on payroll.
Yeah,
Well, do you want me to frame it real quick?
sure.
Okay.
And then I can give some additional information if there are any questions.
Sure. So since I started, we've been kind of struggling with our current payroll and how it's administered and the communication and aligning with our new handbook. And so we began the process of looking at another provider for payroll. And we looked at taking it on in-house for a while. And that was pretty daunting. And I don't think we actually had the capacity to facilitate in-house. So then we looked out for other payroll providers. I don't think this would fall within our purchasing policy per se, because it is a service provided to the employees. So typically we wouldn't go out for RFP for a retirement plan. And this would kind of fall under that as well. So I'm justifying this as not within our like purchasing, like we wouldn't have to go for an RFP, because I doubt we would get ADP to even respond to our RFP. So we did our own research. And honestly, Melina's been heading up this project, so I'll have her take it from here.
Yeah, so I did a little bit of research and I found ADP, and I've been communicating with them for several weeks at this point, just getting information together. I included their proposal in your packet. They're a really great company. It would really update our current payroll system and kind of bring us into 2023 instead of the way that we've been functioning. They have really great HR functions. They're the things that are included in their mobile app that employees would have access to moving forward would be a lot easier for us to function with than what we're currently using. And I mean, budget wise, it's really not going to impacts what we're spending on payroll by very much at all. First year, we get a 2-month discount as the clients, and then moving forward, the difference is a little over $1,500 a year.
And this is something that I would normally just administratively approve, but I wanted to just pass it by the committee to show that, you know, we are changing and there might be a change next year, and I just want you all to be versed in it.
It's a
Any
good
thoughts?
move.
Any
It's a good move.
questions? Great.
Organizational infrastructure, let's improve it. Great job.
Yes. And we did look at Cassell. Melina did probably a couple months trying to figure out how we
Yeah.
could just get a Cassell program, but
Cassell wanted $12,000 just for the addition of 2 applications, and then an additional $250 a month on top of what we already pay just to keep those apps running. So wildly outside of our budget. And it would increase the amount of hours that we as staff would be spending on processing payroll in-house. ADP would essentially facilitate me being able to do it with lot less hours and effort and errors.
yep. So we're very excited for this move and we wanted to share it with you all.
Good work.
Awesome. Cool. Any questions, comments, concerns on this one?
No, I've
right.
had a corporate relationship with them for years, so they're good company.
Great.
I'm just very happy that you realize that doing it in-house is not worth it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, Melina, for working on this.
Yeah, of course.
And they actually offer a lot of resources for us too. So we're really excited about that.
You know, moving forward a year from now, we could move to their retirement. They offer workers' comp. There are a lot of services that they offer down the road that if we decide to switch over, it'll make everything much easier.
And the best part is too, that we'll have an online onboarding system
Right.
for everyone.
Hires will just get a link and they can see employee handbook, all policies, anything they need to sign and turn in. They'll be able to do it online and it'll be in a secure file instead of paper files.
So, all right, wonderful. Well, thank you. As you can tell, we're very excited.
Very excited.
Okay, we'll move on to our refuse fund sustainability. So I didn't want to lose this, and this is probably a topic we'll keep bringing up with the finance committee until we get somewhere on it, basically. But just wanted to kind of update everyone. Melina did some research into our rates that we've had in the past, and she found this great document. It was a financial analysis done that outlined that we have been depleting our refuse fund for quite a while now. I would say probably over like since 2008. So
Trend.
I'm not sure where we're still researching where we had an increase in that refuse fund that led us to purchase those what are they called, the trash cans.
The trash can.
So we're still trying to research that, but wanted to kind of give you all a snapshot of what it looked like, and why we're in this predicament that we are in right now with the refuse fund. Yes, Jim.
When you say trash cans, do you mean the dumpsters or like the?
There was a comment made at the meeting on the 23rd that said in January, that said that we had a increase in funds, and that's why we purchased the beautiful trash cans that we have around town.
It was a public comment.
Right, it was a public comment, so we looked
About
into
where that public comment came from.
and we couldn't find a place where we actually had, there's slight increases sometimes where we're right above the line, as you guys can see from the graphs, but I'm not sure. I'd have to look back. Do you remember when that was, Jim?
Didn't those, I was before I joined, but
Okay,
before I was elected, I think it goes back to the flower potters and the beautification project.
okay.
And that came out of the bed tax.
Oh, okay. Okay, lodging. Okay, so that's great.
I'm pretty sure on that one.
Yeah, that was a question I had of, there seems to be there's some assumption in the community that we heard from the public comment, and I think I saw online in discussions that there had previously been a surplus, and there were questions about why there now wasn't. So I really appreciated this graph. It's a beautiful graph, whoever made it. And I think all the information you've compiled here is really helpful. So to me, the graph settles the discussion of if and when we ever did have a surplus, because you can see starting in, 2019, these very much diverge. So if anybody has any other history on if and why there was a surplus and the community feedback on, well, where did it go? I think it'd be helpful to just clarify that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it
Now, that
sounds
was-
like you were attempting to.
Yeah, that was our goal. So our next steps, hopefully, I'm trying to set up a meeting with Bruin to ask for metrics on how much residential versus commercial that they're actually processing. So we can have a good idea on the percentage of our waste that goes out. And then that can help with our rate adjustments that will be needed. Another idea too is, absorbing the refuse fund into the general fund and subsidizing the trash because it is an expensive endeavor. I don't know if we're ever going to make any money off of it, but that's another option that we can consider for 2024. We did put money into it this year, but that way we wouldn't have to do administration fees for it, which basically offset what we put in this year. So yeah, that's an option, but hopefully as we go through this year, we'll have this figured out by budget season. But I just wanted to let you know that we are still really working on this because we do want it to be at least sustainable or have a plan for subsidizing it.
I had a question. When we look at the divergence kind of around a little after 2019, is that really when the rates changed, like with Bruin, that the rates increased to the town? Do we know?
I know in 2021, right before I started, there was a new contract that was signed. But that's the information I have. And then the rates,
We had another rate.
in 2022, we did have a 7% increase.
Yeah, and can you or Matt answer, like, have we ever increased the base rate across the board?
We proposed it, but we haven't implemented it. And that was back in 2017. I think that's resolution was written up for.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so we found a resolution, but we realized that nothing was ever adjusted afterwards.
Mm-hmm. So really, a previous board approved a rate increase, but just administratively, it never got implemented.
That's correct.
That seems to be the yes.
Yeah, okay, interesting.
So at one point they did see this coming. And now we're in the middle of it again.
Yeah. I guess I have two kind of questions from a staff capacity standpoint. This is an important issue because it's a fund that needs to be sustainable. We need to manage it appropriately, and we need to answer the question of sort of like level of service provided to the community and level of like fee that community members pay in some sort of equal shared portion, but also just asking the question of like, how much staff time makes sense to put into this fund in particular? And is there, I don't think quick and dirty is the right word, but like, do we first need to answer the question of, do we want to subsidize this and put it in the general fund, or do we want to raise the rates on everybody? And, there could be a perfect solution that everybody is paying exactly the right within a percentage of their exact trash generation, or we can also have a good enough approach where the rates all go up and the fund is like expenditures and revenues are flat. So I guess that's just kind of my question for discussion with this group as far as priorities on research and solutions. Does that question make sense? Nothing, crickets.
No, that I understand what you're saying. I just don't know. I don't know the answer. Is it more important to just understand now that we're going to subsidize this forever and just go that route?
Or do some combination, meet in the middle, you know, raise, if the rates have increased from Bruin and we've already renegotiated the contract and really there's not another provider, it's like, answer that question. Is there a better contract out there? Yes or no? And then the question of, okay, what's the difference? And do we all kind of come in the middle somewhere where base rates go up for everybody, but not to the full extent to cover the cost, and the town subsidizes a portion as well? And we just come up with that number? I don't know.
From a staff's perspective, our goal is to try and give you guys that information so you can make that decision. So like knowing the metrics of how much, you know, like the residents are contributing to the trash versus commercial, kind of giving you guys metrics to make that decision off of. But I mean, I'm prioritizing this because as the keeper of the finances, I want to make sure that we're not continuing to go into debt in this fund. I mean, we will have to take it back if we, and that would be a policy decision for you all, is if we do want to subsidize it or if we want our residents to pay so that it is a sustainable fund. And that's really the biggest policy question. So what questions from there can we answer to help you make that policy decision?
I think I'd like to know if you're having a conversation with Bruin, Gloria. I think knowing, I liked your idea of a report on residential versus commercial waste, like trying to get some metric for us. That seems like they should be able to provide that in some way. I think also knowing what commercial clients are being charged for, because I do think that we don't have a clear understanding. And I've heard from business owners who are told one thing from Bruin about what their fee covers. And then I think we're hearing a different thing kind of at the town level about what the commercial dumpster fee covers. And so I think being really clear on our end, so we really know what our residents are already paying for at kind of a Bruin direct level, and then at a like town administrated level. It seems like that's a missing link there. Like is Bruin, what is Bruin charging everybody to make sure that we're all kind of speaking the same language? And then thinking about kind of the contractor waste being collected at the transfer station, how we're kind of accounting for and measuring that. So it just seems like there were a couple of questions that were brought up by the community that if we're going to Bruin, we could ask. So what are commercial clients being charged for? Because I think if we're thinking about possible rate increases, it's very appropriate for us to know, or it's helpful for us to know what commercial clients are already paying. So we know kind of that burden already and not overly burden folks. So those are the questions I had.
Any other thoughts on this or questions to ask Bruin?
Yes. I called one of my invoices. I don't know if you all can see that. That's to answer Dana. That's a great question, Dana. First and foremost, there's a monthly surcharge fee of $37. It's $36.54. It's a fuel surcharge, whatever you want to call it, because of our remote location. This is a commercial account. I get one pickup a week. because it's the winter time. I have a standard 3-yard dumpster, and it is $174 a month. That should provide you a little bit of a baseline to start with.
Right.
But the surcharge with your monthly rate for that standard dumpster that all the businesses have in town, it's $210.54. That was my total cost for January. And when we rev up for the summertime and we request more frequent pickups, that price does go up.
Jim, thank you for sharing that. That really helps with the
Yeah,
conversation.
Absolutely.
And Jim, we've heard differing communication from business owners versus maybe what Bruin has communicated. Like, there's been conversation about the fee that the commercial businesses pay is for the dumpster use, not for the actual contents of the dumpster. Is there any clarity you can provide to that from your invoice or from anything Bruin provides?
There's none.
Yeah, okay.
Because it's a commercial dumpster, it's a commercial rate.
Yeah.
Regardless of what you put in there.
Yeah.
They're charging you by the yard.
Yeah. But the messaging we had heard at the town level was that fee was for the dumpster, not for transferring the yardage of waste out of the valley. And so that's just really where it's like this confusion, right, of what they're actually charging you. And I think Bruin has told, at least from talking to different business owners, Bruin has told them that the fee does include transferring it out, but that's not necessarily what we've heard. So,
well, my best guess is that the $36.54 that says fuel surcharge would be the transportation cost.
mm-hmm.
The exact is $36.54.
Yeah. And then, okay, so that's your bill directly with Bruin. And then there's the base rate that you would pay to the town.
I don't have that information from me.
Yeah. Okay.
Then I can find it and let you know.
Yeah, it just seems like I appreciate Gloria you seeking some more information.
Yeah. And we did start a relationship this year. I helped them with a composting grant. So they are working on getting some composting here. All the product would go to Nucla there's a new facility there. So I'm not sure about getting the product back here for like gardening and stuff, but
we're just going to drive our waste out, turn it into compost, right? I mean, I don't know. This seems a little bit, this is a funny concept to me.
fair.
Yeah, it seems silly.
Yeah, I can jump in. Can y'all see that? Town of Silverton?
Yeah, it looks like mine right here. Yeah.
Apparently I'm more prepared than I thought. My landfill transfer is $346.40. And that is from December 1 through, that is November 1 through December 31st. It's on a 2-month cycle.
And that's not water or anything. That's just the landfill transfer.
Just the landfill. That is correct. For $346.40.
On top of the 210 and that was for 2 months, but then on top of the 210 that you paid.
I pay this, yes. And then I pay this to the town of Silverton.
Right.
And this is just information to try to build this metric.
That amount tells me that Kelly adjusted his rate before she left, based on the EQR rates that she and Bill put together.
Okay. So your rate might have already been adjusted.
That sounds very
higher.
That sounds very high. The commercial base rate is about $64 and some cents for other businesses.
So it sounds
Yeah.
like administratively, some businesses have been charge the new EQR rate that was proposed.
You mean I'm not gonna get a refund?
That's not okay. Like, some businesses can charge that, but others haven't. That's what that sort of sounded like. That's
That sounds,
It sounds like that's what Kelly must have, it must have been
Okay,
adjusted.
well.
I think
are
we
gonna
have some-
figure this out.
Unless
Yeah,
they-
I think
they're
we have
wrong.
some administrative infrastructure. We have the one piece of the rates being increased in 2017 and not being actually administered. And then we have differing administration of EQR rates. So we kind of just need to be transparent and work through this.
Yes,
Either that or there was an error in Cassell and it just shouldn't be that much for him for the last billing cycle, which is also possible.
Those EQRs have to be manually entered. That was would be a,
Oh, that has to be manually entered. Okay.
yeah, exactly, because that's actually putting in the multiplier.
Okay. Okay. So that's not being difficult.
well, Jim, you and I are gonna talk a little bit more.
Jim, are you feeling picked on?
no, this is funny because I think in one of the meetings, one of our public meetings, I made the comment that I pay X and everyone's like, no, we don't pay that much. And I'm like, well, actually I do.
Yeah, well, and I think we heard from several other business owners. So I do think at kind of a town level.
Well, and it's
yeah.
the cost of doing business. It is what it is.
But again, back to fair share and equitable, and let's just implement this in a way that makes sense for everybody.
Right.
Yeah,
Well,
and
again-
hopefully we can have it clearly laid out so that you know what you're being charged for as well. That would be our goal.
Again, just the providing of this information just provides a baseline for our discussion.
No, thank you, Jim. That really does help.
It was a
As-
key question I had. Yeah, is like, what are people actually paying in town so we can make sure that we
Yeah.
are tracking it appropriately and knowing what you're paying with Bruin, so you're not getting charged multiple times. Yeah.
Yep. So I think it's worth staff time to keep pursuing this, especially if there might have been some administrative areas in the past. So we would like to clear all that up and continue working on this.
Thank you.
Yep. Oh, boy. Okay. Are we good to move on to the audit update?
Yes.
We're excited about this one too.
So the audit's been going pretty well so far. I know I've got about 15 out of 23 items, the initial request submitted. After those are all submitted, they kind of look through those and ask a few more questions. That usually takes a couple weeks. So everything is really online to be completed well before the April 30th deadline. I expect that all my initial deliverables will be in by the end of February, and then we should have things start to get buttoned up by the end of March.
Our goal is to get it in by April this year so that we have solid numbers to budget with.
That's good.
Yep.
That's great, guys.
Awesome. All right.
Thanks for your work on that.
And then Matt and I wanted to talk to you all about ACH payment. So go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, so there are a few vendors that we work with that have the time that the invoices are due to be paid is before our meetings usually. Like for instance, our health insurance provider has a due date of the 10th of each month. And it is very rare for the second Monday of a month to fall before the 10th. So we were wondering if we could get authorization for things like our insurances and so forth to just be automatically paid, like an payment transaction. That way we can make sure that our healthcare providers are happy with us, making sure the bills are paid.
Otherwise, we get late payment notifications, even if the payment's gone out, we still get them because it's not before the 10th.
And with a few of these, if the bill and the mail or the bill and the checks cross the mail, you might end up with some fees. So it might end up being a bit cheaper for us in the long run to set up these ACH transactions with late fees.
Any concerns on that from the trustees?
How many account, like, are we talking about 5, 10, 23?
We're talking about probably like, 5 accounts, but they are big ones, like our
Yeah.
healthcare bill or health insurance bill is on the order of 14 grand.
I think that makes sense though, if we're, so we don't have fees and it reduces kind of administrative burden of.
Mhm.
I do,
Thank
and
you.
it's,
Yeah.
it's not something that we're going to be questioning every month, like the
Right.
insurance bill is the insurance bill. We're gonna sign that check. And sadly, there's not a lot you can do to, even if they did change it, there's not much we're gonna do to negotiate with them. So let's make sure that it's just signed and paid. Or, ready for you all also.
And there's no real fluctuation in those billings.
Only when we get more or less employees.
Thank you.
Would it be helpful if we were to identify, I'm just wondering how far to go with this, if we wanted to identify those accounts and how much, and then present that to the board with a resolution so that you all are clear that that's going out ACH, like that's just automatically going out.
Yeah, I think that'd be helpful for transparency if it's not too hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And even just who it's to, I'm not even sure amounts are as important. If the public wants to see what the amounts are, they, our previous books are open. So.
Mhm.
Okay. We'll just identify where it's going. And then we can still include it in our APs, right? Or that would be a separate one.
That would be a separate because it wouldn't be generated through Excel, but when we put in actuals, it can figure it out.
Okay. Okay.
Or we can
So are
just
you
make-
saying it would still show up in the consent agenda?
In our actuals, I guess.
Yeah.
And I could just get a roster of things we do ACH payments for, and then just prints out an ACH payment roster for the agenda.
There you go. Does that work?
Yeah.
Great. Awesome. So we'll just bring that to the board, probably not this meeting, but the next meeting, so we have time to do all that research, and that'll come before you on the 13th of March. Just makes our lives a little easier here. Scrambling to try and pay the bills on time and thinking that our insurance is gonna, they do threaten to like terminate our insurance.
Yeah, that's not how, yeah, let's just automate what we can.
Yeah. Great. So that's all we had. Is there anything from trustee discussion that you guys wanted to contribute?
I didn't have anything.
Okay. Great.
No, thank you very much.
Thank you,
Thank
guys.
you all for your time. Really appreciate it. We kept it
Thank
an
you.
hour. Good job.
Very pleased. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Y'all have a good day.
You too.